Thank you everyone for joining us. Today's event sees us look at our ground vehicle fleet of rapid response vehicles. In an average year, over 45% of missions are attended by our crews in rapid response vehicles, and this happens for a number of reasons, of which you'll hear many today. They're hugely high spec cars, and they really get put through their paces to ensure that the crews can kind of get to where they need to on time and as quickly as possible. But this means that every 5 years we have to replace them, and that's the stage that we're at the moment. We now need to replace the fleet and to make sure we've got the most suitable and effective kit out there. So here to tell us lots more about RRVs today are two members of our operations team. Firstly, we have Head of Operations Richard Heinsohn. Richard served for 14 years in the British Army as a combat medic, serving tours in Kosovo, Iraq and Afghanistan. He joined the charity in 2014 and as our Head of Operations is responsible for overseeing our clinical operations at both bases in Norwich and Cambridge. He's been integral in the delivery of some of our biggest projects, including the delivery of Blood on Board and enabling us. Happy. Second up, we have EAAA Critical Care Paramedic and Operations Manager, Gary Stewart. Gary was one of the first critical care paramedics to join the charity almost 20 years ago. His role developed recently, and as well as continuing to fly with us for a few shifts a month, he recently became Operations Manager, making him responsible for ensuring our crews have everything they need to work effectively and managing the team that help make that happen. And also I have to say, while preparing for this talk, lots of colleagues said that he's one of the nicest guys to work in the organisation. So very warm welcome to you, Gary. Rich is very nice as well, I have to add in. They're both very nice people, but Gary got a special mention. But Richard, if I could hand over to you, perhaps you could start by just telling us a bit more about RRVs and why they're so important to the life-saving work that we do.
Thanks, Holly, and thanks to all of you for attending. First of all, just to apologise, I've currently got COVID. I'm over the worst of it now, but that's why I'm working from home and not in the office today. So please forgive me if I'm not on top form today. And forgive me if my home internet doesn't keep up with the work internet. There's not much I can do about that, unfortunately. So there's often a misconception, really, that, you know, an air ambulance, what do you need a car for? You know, it's all about the helicopter, isn't it? It's all about, you know, being able to fly really, really fast and all the rest of it. And to a large extent, you know, the majority of our work is about the helicopter and getting the clinical team to the right place, and then the ability to obviously transport the patient with the helicopter. But it's surprising once you learn a bit more about what the air ambulance do, how often and how much we do rely on the RRV to maintain operational effectiveness. So Polly mentioned some of the numbers, about 40% or so of the jobs we attend are by rapid response vehicle. And I guess you want to know, well, why would you use a car when you've got a helicopter? And there are quite a few different reasons for that. Firstly, up until fairly recently, well, you know, since June last year, we didn't have an aircraft 24/7 available. So when the helicopter wasn't available, then we would go by RRV. So, you know, to put it in context, in 2021, we attended 1,122 jobs. I'll just quickly show you the chart, actually. Quite interesting. I'll just knock this up this morning if it happens. So you can see on the screen there, it is sharing, isn't it, Hall? Yeah, perfect. So you can see the job numbers. These were just job numbers for the RRV in 2021, and you've got sort of medical emergencies, 521 jobs we responded to by RRV. You know, RTCs, 164 RTCs that we may not have been able to attend had we not had an RRV to respond by. What that looks like then, if I get this other bit up. So this shows like a heat map of where those jobs sit. So you can see the closer you are to our main bases, you know, that's predominantly where the RRVs would operate from. They do go a bit further away, further afield, as you can see some of these hotspots down here as well, and to the right. But generally, the hotspots are near where the bases are. If I just scroll down, just because these are just numbers, do they mean anything? Every single one of these pins represents a job that we attended by RRV in 2020. So you can see that just makes you feel a bit more than me reading out a number or a percentage. Like every single one of them dots were a job that we did last year. And I think that's quite powerful when you're trying to cut through the noise of just firing out top line numbers, a bit of a visual representation of how many people's lives were affected by the ability to respond by RRV. I'll share that. So when would we use the RRV then? So as shown on the map, sometimes it's location. So if you're in Norwich City Centre or Cambridge City Centre, quite often it'll be much quicker for the clinical crew to jump in the RRV, drive into the city centre than it will for the aircraft to take off, find a landing site, land, and then the crew get from where they've landed to the incident scene. So that's probably the most common reason why we would use the RRV, is purely it's the quicker response for those really short distances. The other aspect of it is the aircraft availability. So they're quite complicated machines, helicopters. They do get niggles, they do get technical problems, and when that happens, obviously they can't fly. And when they can't fly, if we didn't have an RRV, essentially we would have no operation to deliver water. So the technical and maintenance issues of the aircraft that sometimes make it unavailable. There's obviously pilot sickness as well, especially with COVID going on. Pilot reports sick in the morning. It might take several hours, if at all possible, to try and get somebody else in to cover that shift. The biggest one is probably the weather. So poor weather limits, especially at night, the weather limits are even more strict. Can mean that on a foggy morning the aircraft can't fly, therefore the only way we can respond is by RRV, and that's why you will see some of the jobs extending beyond that sort of city centre element and start expanding further places. What's interesting to note though, if they were to respond by car, even when the helicopter was online, to say Norwich City Centre or Cambridge City Centre, if they then decided they needed to transport that patient, so say from Norwich to Addenbrooke's Hospital, for example, then they can call in the helicopter that can fly independently with the two pilots on as well. So they don't lose that ability to take them to the right hospital, assuming that the aircraft is online and not offline for any of those other reasons. Occasionally, not very often, but occasionally we also have an extra car on shift as well. And that could be because some of our paramedics have got additional hours they're able to use, so we put on an additional car. Sometimes this is the request of the ambulance service for additional resource during high pressure times. That again, we put on an additional car that we crew up as well. So that's what makes up those sort of 1,100 plus jobs per year. Now the other question is, well, oh yes, please.
I noticed that on your map, it actually showed you sort of outer London.
That's correct. Yeah, absolutely. It can go.
So doesn't that take quite a long time to get down there?
Well, from Cambridge, it can take quite a long time. Yes.
Yeah.
It certainly can. Sometimes we get these jobs straight from a hospital as well. So we might have ended up going to one hospital and then getting, because we're closer, you can end up getting pulled further and further down south into the patch.
Right. Okay.
You know what I mean? So yeah, it can happen. But yeah, we do a fair proportion of jobs in Essex and Hertfordshire, and sometimes down into London as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Richard, how many RRVs have we got now? Can you remind me, please?
So we have 4 RRVs in total, 2 at each base.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Excellent. So people will also ask, well, I'd rather the helicopter came than the car came. That would be better, wouldn't it? It's not, actually. A level of equipment and the clinical intervention, the service and the care that can be delivered, whether an RRV arrives, or our RRV arrives, or our helicopter arrives, is the same, with the one obvious difference that we can't load someone at the back of the RRV and take them to hospital. That is the only difference. And I acknowledge that is a significant difference, but that's not a change in the level of care that the crew are able to provide. So they'll still be able to do the pre-hospital emergency anaesthesia, so put you to sleep. They're still able to do the same surgical interventions that we do. They've got that same chest kit and all that surgical kit. They're still able to do all the trauma management, the splintage and packaging of the patient. They'll still be able to do all the scene management. Now, this is a real sort of, and Gary knows this very well as a very experienced pre-hospital care provider, is the ability to get a scene moving. These scenes in pre-hospital, they can be quite challenging, quite overwhelming, and having the expertise to come in and start making things happen, making progress. When someone's rolled over, trapped, it's chucking it down with rain, it's dark, you're trying to get them out of the car. It can often, people go into a sort of slow motion phase, and then our crew come in and go, right, this is what we're doing. So that scene management bit that really gets the job going, again, they can obviously still do that. The advanced interventions and the advanced diagnostic tools that the crew carry as well are still all available when they respond by RRV, and the same wide ranging of drugs to treat everything from traumatic injuries to medical emergencies are all in hand as well. So it's the exact same level of care, and I think that's a really sort of important message, because some people will say things like, "Oh, it was only the RRV that came," when actually the RRV is not because you weren't that sick, so we sent the car rather than the helicopter. You're just as sick whether we go by air or by land to respond.
And can I ask, Richard, did we always have the RRVs alongside the helicopter, or did it start heli and then?
Yeah, no, we didn't, Holly. We started off just helicopter only, and then it was probably 12 years ago or so, give or take, slightly before my time, that they introduced cars as well, because they identified those times when they had the clinical expertise and the equipment sat in the crew room, but for whatever reason they weren't able to respond because the aircraft was unavailable, whether it was bad weather or pilot sickness or gone tech or whatever. So they're crying out to knowing that there's people out there that need their help, but they've got no platform to actually go out there and help them. So that's when the RRVs were introduced into the air ambulance operation. So then we talk about the tasking for the car. So if I take it a step back and I talk about when they actually get a task through. So the red phone goes, the critical care desk, give them the information, grid, some basic patient info, like what type of incident it is and how old they are, that kind of thing. It's at that stage then that the crew will make a sort of assessment as to which platform is appropriate to use, assuming they're both available. If only the car's available, then it's an easy decision. But if they're both available, they will make that assessment there and then, immediately put the grid reference onto the mapping system, onto their tablet, so they can have a look, and then they can work out if it's better value to drive there or to fly there. So they make that judgment within a few seconds. From that, all the information gets sent through to the car system, so all the mapping and everything is generated. So when they get in the car and started up, they know where they're going into the system. And the CCP, the paramedic, will always drive the RRV, and the doctors essentially will be doing comms, assisting with navigation, getting updates maybe from crew at scene or from the critical care desk whilst they're en route. Also, whilst they're en route, the paramedic and the doctor will be discussing a plan. So, if it was a paediatric case, for example, they'd be going through their drug dosages, which obviously children for adults, and depends what age and things like that. If it is an RTC, they might be talking about different ways in which they might get the extraction. If it's major trauma or burns or cardiac arrest, they'll be talking about specialist hospitals where they might go. And having that pre-planning before they've even got there already in their head, so they've already had a lot of that thinking done. So it's quite, as well as driving through the streets in all sorts of weather with, as you know, all sorts of crazy drivers out on the roads, not paying attention. Some quite high level conversations are going on, some navigation's going on, some comms are going on, and some planning is going on. So it's quite an intense period, but they're well drilled, they're well trained. It is, very much day-to-day business for them to execute that. So there is a huge amount going on during that phase of responding by RRV. Now, as much as I'm bigging up RRVs, they do have their limitations. Some are, fairly obvious. So their range and speed to be operationally effective. So What do I mean by that? Well, if a patient is 30 minutes from hospital and it's going to take you 45 minutes to get to the patient, then it's going to be quicker that the ambulance crew who may be already at scene just to throw them almost in the back of the ambulance and use diesel as the best treatment all the way to the hospital rather than wait on scene for our crew. That really does, limit its range of its operational effectiveness due to the fact that it may be quicker for the patient to take us straight to hospital rather than delay their treatment, get our crews to arrive. The speed, I mean, they're not slow by car standards, but they're very slow by helicopter standards. A helicopter, 150 mile an hour in a very straight line, it's going to struggle to keep up. The other very obvious one is it's not able to transport patients. Quite often there is already an ambulance crew at scene or en route to the patient at the same time as we're tasked, but not always. And they may be first at scene and are, fairly frequently, although not most of the time. But when they are first at scene and they're there on RRV, then they are very much reliant on the ambulance service, which we know, if we read, the papers in the news about East of England ambulance service, but most ambulance services, the NHS in general, I would say, under such pressures, look, there have been, significant delays of ambulances. So it does mean that then getting the patient to the hospital is more limited than it would be if we've got the aircraft, which then we can take complete control and transport the patient as we wish. So they're the significant ones is the range, which is why we've got the helicopter, and the carry platform, again, which is why what the helicopter can overcome that the car can't. Hopefully I've convinced you and explained to you enough so you understand, what RRVs mean to us and how much they improve and maintain our operation, and they're very pivotal to that operation. The next bit really is to essentially talk about what we're looking for, what we're trying to do, what is the project plan on all of this, what is our replacement program. And I'm very pleased to say that this is one of Gary's first big projects that he's got, having joined us in November, settled down nicely, and now he's got this big project of replacing 2 of our old RRVs and getting some new ones. So he's going to just explain a bit about how it may seem really simple, and to the outside world, I understand why it says you just go and buy some cars, don't you? Well, it's not quite as simple as that. So, but I won't steal Gary's thunder, and I'll let him tell you more about it.
Thank you, Richard. Good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to meet you. Well, my position here as the operations manager, one of my first projects, as Richard said, I've been given, is to look at the replacements of our now unfortunately aging vehicles. The 2 vehicles that we're looking to replace are the 2 Land Rover Discovery Sports, which are now coming up for 6 years old. I've done a number of miles. And as well as their age, our operation has moved on. We're now capable of delivering far more interventions than we were 6-7 years ago. And with interventions comes equipment, and our requirement to carry equipment just gets more and more as we want to do more and more things and have that capability to help more and more patients and their specific conditions. The aircraft, as I say, the aircraft's getting bigger. That's an H145 aircraft now, which is bigger than we've ever had before. And likewise, the response cars needed to grow as well. When we went through our program of looking into replacing our Skoda cars that we had some years ago, which were just quite small estate cars by comparison to the vehicles we have now, there was quite an extensive study done into different manufacturers and what they could offer as far as service and maintenance backup, because obviously we need to have the cars on the road as much as possible. We want them to be reliable, and we want them to be large enough for what we need. And in doing that, there were a number of manufacturers that were approached. And those manufacturers, I guess you could all have a good guess at, are the manufacturers that manufacture other emergency service vehicles. So you've got BMW and Audi, Volvo, Skoda, all the usual suspects, if you like, who manufacture the vehicles that all the emergency services use. Now, something which not everybody may know is that a number of manufacturers, predominantly Volvo and BMW in the UK, do have specialist emergency service and authority arms to their companies, and they will make and specify vehicles which are more appropriate for those areas. So some of the authority and emergency service vehicles that you'll see labelled up as police, fire, ambulance, this kind of thing, they won't have necessarily all of the niceties inside that you might be able to get from a Volvo showroom yourselves, for example. But what they will have is uprated suspension and uprated braking systems. Some of them uprated engines as well, but a lot of the engines are fairly standard across the civilian specifications as well. So that's something else to consider when we're looking into changing the vehicles. And this time round, because there's been so much work done over previous studies, we can look back at the work we've previously carried out regarding studies into the vehicles. So this process round on this occasion, because the Volvo XC90s that we have just now have been very successful. We were looking more towards Volvo for their support in our replacement program this time round because of the work we've already done. And what we're very aware of is we want to redo a lot of work which has already been carried out by ourselves and the studies that have gone on previously. So we're looking heavily at Volvos at the moment. That's not to say that we're ruling out any other vehicles, but that's kind of where we are. So what I'll do with you now is I'll just share my screen and just go through briefly the vehicles that we're now using, and from there I can give you an example of just what it is we're looking for in a vehicle. Hopefully you can see that there. Holly, is that okay? Yeah, smashing, grand. Okay, so as you can see on the screen there then, that's our current helicopter, the H145, and our current response cars, the Volvo XC90. And as Richard was saying, we have 4 cars in total. We have 2 of the Volvos and 2 of the Land Rovers. And as I say, it's the Land Rovers we're looking to replace. Now then, the vehicles itself, that's Helimed House, the new base at Norwich, with our existing Volvo in its carport there. Within the carport itself, as I say, it's all laid out with electric doors front and back. So actually leaving the bay is quite a quick process for us, as Richard was saying. Once the bell goes, we decide whether we're going to go by air or by road, and then it's quite a quick process if we're going to go by road with the electronic doors and so on. Within there, we have a charging system for the car as well. As you can see, with lots of emergency service vehicles, they have lots of flashing blue lights and sirens, and there's equipment on charge in the boot and this kind of thing. So it has 2 battery systems. It has one for the car, and it has one for all the ancillary bits and bobs. And it's the ancillary electrics, which the car's on charge all the time once we get back through a separate connection at the back. Which once we get into the car, turn it on, and it automatically spits out that plug from the back, just saving us a few seconds when we are responding. Again, we're badged up as a critical care team, and that's what the charity is providing. It's providing that critical care team of a doctor, paramedic, whether it be by air or by road. And it's why it's so important to have these cars available, because we've got that team sitting, waiting for the phone to ring. And there are times, as Richard explained, where if the weather is out of limits and we just can't go by air, then that doesn't stop us going out and helping, because we have the cars available. Now, the cars that we use, as I mentioned, are the Volvos, but irrelevant to the type of car, there's a lot of aspects to any response vehicle that we look for. One of the big ones is the ability for other people, other road users, to see us. And that's A, for when we're moving through traffic, making progress under emergency driving conditions. And that's also for when we're parked at a scene so that other people can see us and don't drive into us. As an example of all the fluorescent shiny material on the back of the car there, which really does show up at night. Now, the equipment that we carry, as I mentioned, going back over time, as I say, I've been involved with the RRVs charity now for, blimey, nearly coming up for 20 years, and initially we didn't have cars. Going back many years, 15 years or so now, we had a car sponsored to us from Rover in Bury St Edmunds some years ago. It was a very small car, and we didn't carry much equipment at all, but it was fine for that. And over time, as I said, we've had the Skodas, we've had the Land Rovers, and now with these. But the XC90, the Volvo, has got the biggest boot, and it's that specification, that boot size, which is almost a minimum for us in our study to go out and procure and replace the existing Land Rovers. And I'll explain one of the drawbacks with the Land Rovers in a few slides' time, a few pictures' time. But the equipment you're looking at there, that is the equipment that we carry in the helicopter. The only difference is we don't have a stretcher, as Richard said, but all the bags and all the other bits of medical equipment are exactly what we carry in the helicopter. So when we turn up at scene, other than the ability to transport, there is no difference in our ability to treat and care for the patient. And it's really just a couple of slides now, and just expanding on that. You'll see as you're looking there that you've got the equipment on the left-hand side, the red and the blue bag, and then the little television-looking thing at the front there. That's our multi-modality monitor, patient physiology monitor. We're looking at blood pressures and heart rates and ECG and all the patient's physiology we can monitor with that. So it's those three items you can see on the left there. Those are go-to pieces of equipment we'll go to every patient with. And then after that, we have a number of other pieces of equipment which we can go back to and collect if we need. On the left, we have a mechanical device for doing chest compressions on cardiac arrest patients. On the right-hand side in the orange bag, we have a ventilator. The ventilator that we carry is the same ventilator that's used in many ITU departments and A&E departments in hospitals. We have our blood products. We're carrying blood now. So if anybody has lost blood through a medical or a trauma incident, then we can help to start to replace some of that blood, and we carry blood products to help with the clotting process. So if somebody is bleeding and their blood isn't clotting appropriately because of the injury, then we carry products to help that along. And then in the back of the vehicle there, we have spare oxygen, we have a ventilator for very small children and babies. And we have a number of other pieces of equipment to help us at some larger incidents. If we go to jobs near water, we've got our life jackets in there if we're on the riverbanks, on the Broads, this kind of thing. We have our PPE, our personal protective equipment for road accidents, our helmets and things in there. So there's a number of pieces of equipment we carry in addition to just a couple of bags of medical kit that we'll take to begin with a patient. And it's all that equipment which needs to be stored safely in one place, because, I mean, God forbid that we would have an accident while getting to scene, but what we don't want to have is any equipment flying around the back of the car that isn't secure. So everything we've got can be secured in the boot area where it's nice and safe should we actually have an accident ourselves. One of the other things that we do, just to illustrate how seriously we take using our response vehicles, is that this time of year we do change across and have full winter tyres on. Now they don't really reduce the speed at which we can respond at, but what they do is really do improve the ability and the road holding ability and the safe nature of our drives to scene during this time of year. Even within the UK, tyres that are made for UK roads, once the air and the road temperatures get down to about 6 degrees, summer tyres don't tend to work very well. If you're popping now to Tesco's and you're not driving particularly quickly and the road's quite dry, you'll probably be absolutely fine. But under emergency driving conditions like wheel drive in all weathers, and whether it be icy, snowy, wet, flooded roads, this kind of thing, these are particularly good at being used on very cold roads, cold and wet roads. They're much softer compound, and the ability to clear water from the treads is much improved, likewise with slush and snow, this kind of thing. So as an organisation, we certainly took that decision to, in the winter months, we change across to the winter tyres, and that's something which many other ambulance services, for example, don't have the ability to do. So that's a good thing for us. We've still got them on, and we'll be changing those in probably May time, middle of May-ish. We'll change back to the summer tyres again, because even the weather forecast now is threatening sleet and snow at some stage over the next week or so down in Norfolk. So we'll keep those on for the time being.
Gary, sorry, on the tyres, it's not a new set each time, is it? If there's still life left in them, they would be used again the following winter, would they?
Absolutely, yes. With tyres, as you know, the legal limit of 1.6 mil on the tread, as an emergency service vehicle, will change those tyres at 3 mil anyway, and for winter tyres, we'll change those at probably 4 mil actually. But yeah, I mean, the tyres that we've got on these now were new last year. So this is the second winter season we've had out of these. And the summer tyres on their alley rims are sitting in the cupboard outside. And we'll pop those down to the Volvo dealer probably sometime in May and get those swapped over. Inside the cars, a couple of things that we have, or three things to point out really. We'll have a navigation system, and when a lot of modern cars that's integrated, so we can run the navigation system through the car itself. We have a colourful row of switches on the kind of just to the left of the centre of the picture there to control all the emergency lighting and the left and right alley flood lighting, this kind of thing. And we have the emergency service radio as well, which is hidden away in the glove box there, which also acts as a tracking system for the ambulance control room. Which is kind of the three areas that all response cars will have. With this car as well, and something we chose to go to with the Land Rovers as well, which we'll come to, is they are an automatic car as well, and certainly emergency services now, a lot of the cars that are driven are automatics. If you can take away something to think of while you're under emergency driving conditions, then all well and good. And yeah, after having been driving emergency service vehicles myself for nearly 30 years now. Yes, automatic is so much easier. It really does give you that extra capacity to keep your eye on the road and not have to think about changing gear. So just a couple of slides now, just to illustrate some of the points I've been saying about one of the supporting reasons to change at least two of our fleet of vehicles. This is the back of the Land Rover Discovery Sports that we have. So that's just the boot area. Now, when we first bought these, as I said, 6 years ago, that was big enough and had the capacity for the bags that we carried. Unfortunately, that didn't last. So what we had to do was build a cage area, or got the converters to build a metal cage area, which took up two of the back seats. So we could spread into to keep all of our equipment nice and safe. So with that equipment that we've got there, both in the boot of the Land Rover, and at the side is one of the other reasons that we're going to be moving away from the Land Rovers, because unfortunately they're simply not big enough anymore. So whatever we get next, whether it's the Volvos or not, will have a sufficiently large boot to account for that. So that's pretty much just a quick run through of the cars that we have at the moment, and the cars which we would have in the future, or some of the main areas that we would have in the future. I mean, does anybody have any immediate questions on what it is specification-wise that we would look for in a car at the moment? Yeah, hi.
Are we thinking of getting electric cars?
Yes, yeah. I mean, now that we've just looked at some of the pictures of the cars, then yeah, I was going to move on to that. We kind of have a couple of options. We have the mild hybrid version, which has a battery alongside the engine, if you like, that can help you out when you're just pulling away and this kind of thing. Or you can have a plug-in hybrid. Now, the plug-in hybrid will give you a small range, generally around the 30 to 40 mile mark, something like that. But what it does do very well is helps out moving that vehicle, getting over that initial inertia when you're pulling away from the lights, if you like. Now, the cars which we drive at the moment, I mean, yes, they're approaching 2.5 ton once they're kind of loaded. So that takes a lot to get going. And the plug-in hybrid with its electric motors really does help that. So yeah, it's a very good question. Thanks for it. But that, yeah, I'm certainly looking at that. And each of the manufacturers that we're looking at the moment, they do have both that mild hybrid and plug-in hybrid options. And it's certainly something which the existing cars that we have now, the fuel consumption for them, again, under emergency driving conditions, as you'd expect, it's not brilliant. It's not as the big manufacturers would advertise, because we do drive a little bit quicker and a little bit more aggressive with accelerators, and so the fuel does go down quicker. So yeah, anywhere where we can help with that is something which, yeah, in all good conscience, we certainly need to be looking at. So yeah, I think it's going to be extremely likely that whatever we do have next will be either mild or plug-in hybrid. Yeah, just to help with our carbon footprint, if nothing else.
Absolutely. And are both Land Rovers at the same base, or are there one at each base?
No, we have one at each base. So at the moment, we're using the Volvos, which are now coming up 3 years old. We're using those as our primary car at each base. The Land Rover, we have one at each base, and they are, if we would term it, our second car. But as Richard alluded to earlier, we use those for a number of options. We have a 24-hour system, so 2 12-hour shifts. So if the day team, for example, is out using the car and the night team come in, the reasons the day team went out on the car may have been because the aircraft was either unserviceable, they have a very good service record, but they do sometimes break, or the weather's bad. Now, if that happened during the day, a few hours ago, then that's probably still the case. So when the night team comes in, they would just be sitting there with nothing to do. So they've got that second car that they can book onto and make themselves available and go out and carry on with the patient care and that night shift. So, and it's also there as, yes, it's a backup. And again, as Richard said, during times of very large incidents, or when the ambulance services are under particular pressure, then yes, we can put on additional resources. We can call in staff to put on a second team. And that's where the car comes in again. So there's a number of reasons there that, yeah, having that second car is of great importance.
Thank you.
That's okay. So I think from my side then, yeah, Richard and Holly and everybody else, I think that kind of covers where we are with the specification of a car, what we would do with it, and some of the aspects that we're looking for, and hopefully how we're going to go about it in changing over our cars in the near future. Holly.
There we go. Thank you so much, Gary. I just wanted to ask quickly a question that we had from somebody who couldn't join us live for this, but so you as the CCP would be the driver of the car, and they just wondered what was the experience like with that, and did you have to have special training to you know, to be able to do it at high speed?
Okay, so as a member of the ambulance service, my initial driver training to drive emergency vehicles was for a fortnight long. So it was a 2-week course in driving, where they initially take you out driving. The instructors take you out driving and then try and knock away all your bad habits and teach you how to drive an emergency vehicle by giving you lots of plans and lots of ways in which you can approach obstacles and this kind of thing. So and then they build that up as the course goes on, and then gathering speed as you go. But the big thing with emergency driving isn't necessarily that maximum speed you try and get to. It's just getting from A to B in a progressive manner by making progress. That's the term. So that the high speed isn't necessarily a huge factor. There'd be no need going at very high speed along a dual carriageway, and then when you get to the town, you then don't have the skills to maneuver yourself through the traffic and position yourself so other people can move and go around traffic and all that kind of thing. So yeah, that's a 2-week course, and then every 5 years we have to recertify that as well. So yes, you've got initial course. Every 5 years you recertify, and then there are in between that you do have observed drives on occasion as well, which go on. So yes, there's quite a bit that goes on in the background.
Quite the skill then, isn't it? Yeah, it's a big part of the job, definitely. And one other question from me really, but is do we liaise with other air ambulances around, you know, which cars do they have, and we kind of take some of their learnings and factor that into our decisions?
We do. That's right. As it's kind of saying there, with the study into new vehicles, we look at other air ambulance operations, other ambulance services, other police forces, and the majority of operations that use similar vehicles do that for a reason. The Volvos, as I mentioned, are a very popular choice now for air ambulance operations, and police as well. So yeah, there's sometimes you can start with a blank piece of paper and come up with a very good solution. Other times, actually using other people's experiences is worthwhile. So yes, we certainly do that as part of the process.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm conscious we're nearly out of time. Has anybody got any more questions before we just? No, perhaps. Richard, do you want to just tell us a bit? We touched on it a little bit with Gary there, but do you want to just tell us a bit more about the future for RRVs? Gary, do you mind just stop sharing your screen, perhaps, and then we can see Richard. But yeah, tell us a bit more about the future. What's in store?
So yeah, I mean, the charity is currently developing its 5-year strategy, and part of that is to look at obviously the climate emergency and the context and the role in which we can play within that. Now, Gary mentioned looking at mild hybrid and plug-in and stuff like that, and he'll be doing that analysis and that assessment, and comparing and contrasting all those versions. The one that we can exclude is full electric, which is really unfortunate, but there's a number of reasons why we're not there yet for our operation. The single biggest factor is probably the infrastructure. So the infrastructure required for us to be able to rapidly charge our RRVs at our bases does not exist. But we've got a plan within the next 3 years that will be in place. So when our current Volvos get to the end of their life, we hope that they will be replaced by full electric. So I'm hopeful, if everything goes to plan, that these 2 Volvos that we hope to buy this year will be the last ones that are not fully electric. But we obviously have to build the infrastructure. We have to get the infrastructure. There's without boring you with some of the details, I mean, getting enough power for the Cambridge base for charging, Cambridge base in particular, because the sub power station isn't big enough to get charging cables to electrically charge our cars there. So there's some big infrastructure problems that need to be overcome before we can get there. That's why at this stage we've had to rule that out as an option, but we have got a plan within 3 years to hopefully get our rapid response vehicles and our pool cars, so our sort of staff cars, if you like, all plug-in, fully electric cars. There are other concerns with electric cars, and the technology even in the last year has moved on significantly. But you have got things like the range of the vehicles is a concern. The rapid charging availability, clearly we haven't got it at our base yet, but we would probably need to see a bit more infrastructure around the region for that capability as well. So it's like there's problems to solve, but we're already right now working out our strategy for how to solve them over the next 3 years to be there. It's just the timing is not quite right to do that now. But it is quite exciting, and you know, the charity is very conscious of the fact of what we do, and we help people and everything like that. But we can't do that at the expense of the environment, and we have to make changes, like all businesses are, like all organisations are, to make sure we're environmentally sustainable into the future. I'm really excited with what the charity might be able to do in that area. I know Tom's heard a lot about some of the grand plans that we've had and everything like that, and it's quite exciting to get really stuck into this, working for an organisation that isn't looking to tick boxes but is actually trying to do it morally and correctly and properly and all the rest of it. It's really exciting place to be, and I think it'll be a real sort of landmark moment of how far we've come once we do go fully electric. We'll be doing lots of other things in the background as well, but that'll be the first sort of outward obvious one to everybody that the general public can see our electric RRVs, driving around Norfolk, Cambridge, Bedford, Suffolk and beyond. So quite excited about that, but there's a lot of work to do, but I just wanted to reassure you that we're on it and we'll get there. We just need a bit more time to make it happen.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, the commitment to keeping us going and to making sure that we're able to be there for patients as quickly as they need us in the best way possible is just astounds me. The work that gets put in to make that happen. So thank you so much to you both for joining us today. Any more questions before we finish? No, as ever, if you think of anything else, just drop me a line. I wouldn't be a very good fundraiser if I didn't finish by kind of drawing your attention to the fact that we haven't talked about how much the new cars are going to cost yet, because I think that Gary's still doing that piece of work, and we need to get to that final figure. But then we will be launching an appeal, a fundraising appeal to raise the money to fund the new cars. So look out for that in the next few months. It will be an appeal through your doors. So any support for that is very appreciated. So thank you so much. But I really hope you've enjoyed today and that you've learned something new. I definitely have. I always do when I hear from the operations team. And yeah, thank you to our supporters for joining us, and thank you, Richard and Gary, for speaking to us. So thank you so much, everyone. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Very informative.